Okay, it's now 5 o'clock, so I think we are going to get started. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's community meeting on San Francisco International Airport's ground-based augmentation system. I'm Brad Eggleston. I'm the Director of Public Works for the City of Palo Alto. And just to say, the City of Palo Alto is very happy to be hosting SFO staff and consultants who are going to provide a presentation on GBAS and answer community member questions. This second meeting is a follow-up to a first meeting about GBAS that we held in June. And with us this evening from SFO are Nupur Sina, who's the Acting Director of Planning, Doug Yakel, the Public Information Officer, Bert Ganung, the Noise Office Manager, Paul Hanna, who's a consultant with Lean Corporation, and Christian Valdez, a consultant with Landrum and Brown. So before we get started, a couple of housekeeping issues to touch base on. First, we're recording the presentation and we'll plan to make it available online. After the presentation, like the first meeting, we will have a question and answer session. So we'll first answer verbal questions from attendees who raise their hands. I'll call your name and we'll bring you forward as a panelist so that you can turn on your video if you like and then ask your question. And we would ask that you please do limit your turn to one question. We want to make sure that there's time for everyone to have a chance. If there's enough time, there may be a chance to ask a second question verbally. And then once there are no more verbal questions, if we actually get to that point, we'll use any remaining time to answer additional written questions that are in the Q&A function that you see on the screen there. And then just to add, we may not have time to get to every question tonight, but SFO does plan to answer any remaining questions from the Q&A and make those answers available. So with that intro, I'm going to turn it over to SFO staff for their presentation.
Thank you, Brad. Really appreciate the introductions. Real quick, we want to let everyone know that the questions and answers are being processed. We have just a handful left. Paul will touch on that in a little bit. And without further ado, I'll hand over to Paul.
Thanks, Bert. Good evening, everyone. Really appreciate the opportunity to be with you all here tonight to talk about the latest on the GBAS project and talk a little bit more about the flight procedures, in particular the innovative Group 1 procedures that we're doing our best to interface with the community on. On the screen right now, this is page 2 of the PowerPoint presentation, and as Bert and Brad mentioned, we'll have a copy of this available online. It's being recorded now. We also have a version on our website that's available for folks to download, so we'll cover that here in just a moment. This is just the highlights of the topics we'd like to cover here this evening. First, we'll talk just a little bit about the current timeline for the GBAS project, some exciting developments that have happened even since we had a chance to meet with everyone a few months ago. Second thing we'd like to cover is a really exciting opportunity that the GBAS project team had to both engage in a full motion simulator event to take a look at some of the existing and innovative GLS approach concepts, the existing RNAV approach procedures that are here at the airport, and then the innovative GLS procedures that we're looking at developing to enhance those. And then we want to speak just a bit about the upcoming flight evaluation opportunity with United here, in particular with portable noise monitors deployed to see if we can enhance some of our current noise analysis that we've got related to the innovative approaches. And that takes us right into number 3 on the agenda here tonight to take a look at those noise monitoring locations. And as Brad mentioned, we do encourage questions and answers here at the end. So if there's folks that have feedback about those locations, and they want to leave that feedback with us here tonight, that would be great. The fourth thing we want to cover is the questions and answers themselves. And then the latest thing we'd like to do is take a look at the last thing we'd like to do is take a look at the latest community flight procedure packages. The last time we were here, there were only 2 available at that time, and they were in draft format for folks to give us comments about how they look and whether or not we had the right information available to residents there to review. And since then, we now have 12 published online. So we'll take just a minute to kind of poke through those. The one thing that I don't have on the screen at the moment, or I don't have covered in the timeline, is what you'll see here in the lower right-hand corner of this particular slide, which is this orange and white colored pole. And I'm very excited to report that is the San Francisco International Airport GBAS. It was successfully installed as of Friday last week, August 20th. It is not operational at the moment, so it's not broadcasting anything. There are no instrument procedures, available just yet from the FAA for use with the public. But we're very excited that we have essentially at this point completed the civil infrastructure and kind of electrical aspect of the project. So if you're on site at the airport and you're looking out into the general area where the GBAS is, you should see 4 of those antennas like that, and our transmitting antenna as well. So kind of getting closer and closer to reaching our first kind of critical project goals. Here on slide 3, just a quick look at the timeline of what our goal is in terms of interfacing with members of the public here in the San Francisco Bay Area. So as you, on the top half of the diagram, you can see this orange block about equipment installation and testing. I did mention that the GBAS is installed. As I also mentioned, it's not fully operational. It still has to undergo flight test and evaluation with the FAA, and it has to go through a commissioning process. And the first point at which the GBAS is intended to be in operation with the overlay GLS approaches is the 2nd of December. So we're still a couple months away from the point at which any kind of GBAS related flight operations are going to occur. So that's what this orange block is here for. Because we are still a few months away from the actual implementation point, the FAA is still currently finalizing the development of those 4 overlay approach procedures. We'll talk about that in just a second, but that's what this green block here represents. And then I think perhaps the most important blocks for what our goal is here tonight is our outreach here with members of the public to try to get feedback, in particular about our first group of innovative approach procedures, which is kind of our incremental step towards seeking our #1 project goal of finding innovative procedures that can achieve some kind of level of noise reduction over existing approach operations here into the airport. So we do, we have this evaluation block, and in particular, this opportunity for public feedback. Now, if you're looking very closely at this diagram, it would lead you to believe that the end of public feedback, or our seeking public feedback, is going to occur in the 4th quarter of 2021. That is our goal. But if we still find that we're getting lots of public feedback, or we're getting suggestions from the public about how to make small modifications to some of our innovative procedures, and we therefore need more time to get that feedback, we will take that step to potentially extend that out a little bit further. So please don't treat this as like a hard stop. It's just our goal right now is to try to wrap up that feedback. And the reason why we like to wrap up that feedback here in the 4th quarter is because the next group of innovative procedures that we're evaluating takes a fair amount of time for the FAA to actually develop into real flyable procedures for airlines and other aircraft operators coming into San Francisco International Airport. So you see here in our timeline, we're estimating it could take up to 2 years for those concepts that are found to be agreeable, from members of the public and bring them forward into actual procedures. It could in fact take longer than that. So 2 years is kind of the fastest timeline that we would expect those to happen. And certainly if there are candidates that are identified through feedback from the public where it seems like everybody would really like to push forward with them, we want to get those in place and see if we can start achieving those potential noise gains as quickly as possible. That's why we're trying to focus on finishing up our feedback with the public here in the 4th quarter. Just a more near-term focus then here on this slide. So the next couple of months, as I mentioned, the 2nd of December is the first point that we expect the overlay GLS approach procedures that we talked about in our previous briefing here at Palo Alto. Those are the approaches. I'll just show them really quickly here on slide 5. So these are not the GLS procedures. These are the existing RNAV approach procedures that the FAA is developing the overlay procedures against. Technically, we've used the term identical overlay to basically try to clarify how close a match the FAA is making to the existing procedures. So it's the same waypoints, same altitudes, same leg types, same speed restrictions. Everything is identical to what is out there today. The only part that's actually being modified by the GBAS is the final approach segment, which is identified here by these red kind of rectangles. So when we talk about the 2nd of December, it's those 4 approaches: 1 to 28 left, 1 to 28 right, and then 2 approaches to 19 left and 19 right. Those procedures, when they are ready for flight test and evaluation, will be uploaded by the FAA through the Instrument Procedure Gateway to this tab right here. You'll see them on this thing called the IFP Coordination tab. Today, that is not updated just yet. So we, as an airport, and we're just kind of watching the FAA and observing their development as well. We don't have any hand in how the FAA goes about developing their procedures, in this phase. We are expecting those those overlay approach procedures to appear in that tab somewhere in the month of September, relative to the flight inspection timeline, which is now set to occur in the month of October. Flight inspection and flight test is part of the commissioning process. This is when an FAA aircraft comes out to the Bay Area, and it flies a whole bunch of different patterns to essentially ensure that the GBAS works safely and as intended for those 4 overlay procedures. So with an October flight inspection, flight validation, it's very realistic to expect that we would see those FAA instrument procedures of the GLS overlays to show up in the month of September here in this tab. One other important thing that we'll be talking about in a little bit more detail here in a second is that right now, our opportunity to take advantage of a very generous offer from United Airlines for evaluating in the real world what existing approaches and some of our innovative concepts might look like in terms of the noise footprint from their aircraft. That evaluation opportunity is likely to occur in the month of September. More on that in just a moment. And then, as we mentioned before, our target date is December. So I did want to speak about the United aspect. Since the last time we were here, we did have a chance to jump into United Airlines simulators in their Denver Flight Training Center. And in fact, it was more than just United assisting us with this look at the innovative GLS procedures, just a few of them. We had great assistance from United, Boeing, and Honeywell in particular, everybody kind of jumping into the sim. And what we were looking at in that sim event was two aspects in particular. One was we were looking in very close detail at one of the innovative approach procedures that's being proposed here, a concept which is the GLS down the bay approach. In years past, I think people maybe have referred to it as like a bodega east style approach. It's very similar to that. I think there's a different starting waypoint, so we don't maybe think of it as the bodega east. So for us, it's the down the bay, the GLS down the bay innovative approach concept. So we were in the simulator to try that out to see if the altitudes that have been selected are going to be safe and flyable by some of the target aircraft that we've been evaluating. We were also in the simulators to take a look at the existing RNAV GPS approach, in particular to 28 right, with a focus on how aircraft transition from the surfer arrival onto the beginning of that approach path for Eddy and side-by, which is some of the areas here for residents in Palo Alto. And then compare that against our GLS Alpha Group 1 innovative concept. And as you might remember, our Group 1, our innovative concept for the GLS Alpha is to have a slightly higher altitude at side-by, so that as aircraft still have to enter the approach at Eddy at one altitude, they would actually remain a little bit higher over kind of this vicinity of the Bay Area that we're speaking with right now. And that would allow them to achieve their initial deceleration, their ability to slow down a little bit at a shallow, higher altitude where hopefully that noise can dissipate, without less impact to the ground, before then kind of engaging in the remainder of the approach. So again, that's something we also want to make sure that when we get into a simulator works the way we expect. And on this slide, what we found is that, and I'm just kind of focusing very particular on the existing approach, the RNAV GPS approach as it exists today versus the GLS Alpha. What you see on the graphs on the right, it was a very interesting and eye-opening, I think, opportunity in the sims. One thing we discovered was probably no surprise to many residents here, is that the existing approach today does require flight crews to make some interesting decisions about how they want to reduce the speed and when and where they do it. And what that generally leads to, at least in our simulator trials, is either a need to deploy flaps very, very early in the approach procedure. And once the flaps come out, the aircraft is going to make a little bit more noise from an aerodynamic perspective. But once a flap comes out, it stays out for the remainder of the approach. It doesn't come in and out. The other option for pilots is to deploy speed brakes. Essentially, that's what our simulator was showing, is that the existing RNAV GPS approach that's out there, pilots have to choose one or the other to try to accomplish that deceleration. What we were very encouraged by is that the slightly higher altitude option that we were evaluating as our group 1 alternative for GLS, the GLS alpha to 28 right, reduced that need to either deploy speed brakes or to deploy flaps early. So I think that was an interesting, it was an interesting kind of trial for us, and it led us to being prepared to do our real world flight evaluation. And that's what we have here on slide 8. So being in the sims is nice. It helps us to ensure that the pilot workload to use these procedures is good, and that the FMSs, which is the computer on board the aircraft, is going to interpret the procedure the way we hope. But we also wanted to learn a little bit more about how our AEDT-based noise models compare against the real world aircraft that could be flying these innovative concepts in the future. And so United, once again, we're very grateful to their continued participation in the project, has provided us with this opportunity to use their aircraft to make that evaluation, along with portable noise monitors that we are getting set to deploy. We had hoped to achieve some of these flight evaluations a little bit earlier than today, but there's just been some complicating factors with the summer travel schedule and continued COVID complications. So we're actually looking at somewhere between likely September, but maybe September, October. And our goal with these real world evaluations is to again verify that the GOS approaches are definitely not louder than the current approaches, but we also want to use some of the data that we're going to collect from these portable noise monitors to compare it against our predicted values coming out of these tool sets like AEDT 3D with the BATA 4 set that we're presenting in our community flight procedure packages. To that point, here on slide 9, this is just kind of a layout of where some of the possible portable noise monitoring stations are either can be deployed, or areas where we're still seeking feedback on the ideal location. So on this map, you'll see Eddy and side-by. These are the two existing waypoints that are used by today's procedures that our innovative approach procedures would also use in this area. And the plan at this point is there will definitely be a portable noise monitor deployed here at location A, which is the Tevis Place location. There will be one deployed here at location B, which is the Jesuit Retreat Center. Then we have some options that we're seeking feedback on. We have 3 additional locations in between Eddy and side-by where we can place 2 additional portable noise monitors. And that's the locations C, D, and E. And that's something that we're seeking feedback tonight. If folks would like to chime in later in the Q&A session to leave that feedback, or they can leave feedback electronically about what they feel might be the best locations between these 3. And then there's one other possible location, which is location F. At the moment, we have an opportunity to use the Bellhaven Child Development Center in Menlo Park, but we are open to any other suggestions from residents about whether or not something slightly closer to the flight path might be applicable. Before I move away from this, Bert, I just wanted to ask you: is there anything else that I failed to mention for this particular topic?
No, Paul, I think you hit the nail on the head. The locations we're trying to get spaced approximately every 2 miles so that we get an even coverage of it and good noise data. We also want to try to stay directly under it, and that's the reason we comment on the Bellhaven. It's about a 1/4 mile to the west of the route of flight, but if we can get closer, residents' backyard or something that we could depend on, we might be looking at that. We definitely want to stay away from the roadways, things like that, so we get good low-level noise data. Thank you, Paul.
Great, thanks, Bert. And I think we received a question in one of our previous opportunities to interface with folks living in the Bay Area about whether this deployment of the portable noise monitors would be sufficient to capture potentially the areas where aircraft are using speed brakes or making decisions about having to deploy approach flaps a little bit earlier than they normally would for a typical approach without any other constraints. And I think the general answer is we believe so. We believe these are the areas based on at least the noise modeling, the tools that we have in our possession. that we've been using to generate the results for the community flight procedure packages, we do believe that this is the area of kind of maximum interest to ensure that our modeled results are close to what we would hope the real world results look like. So I think that's the portable noise monitoring topic. The other things we wanted to cover here tonight, there's two important topics. The first is that we wanted to let folks know that we really appreciate the questions that are being posed and the feedback that we're receiving so far. And we're doing our best as a team to gather up all of those questions that have been posed to the project team and the airport so far, and put them all together in one common place. But as many of you have probably realized, this project has gone on for a little while, and we've gotten lots of questions. And so it takes us a little bit of time just to work through those questions and answers. And so we've come up with a little bit of a status tracking system to help us identify the questions that have been asked and our ability to catch up with those answers. I'll be jumping into the website here in just a bit, but I wanted to kind of show a quick example here. So for folks that go to this particular link that you see on the bottom part of the page here, you'll notice that there'll be a PDF that you can download, and it has all of the questions that our team have compiled, either from verbal questions that have been exchanged through meetings like the one here tonight, or written questions that were submitted through interactions here with these workshops or our technical working group interchanges. We also would love to encourage folks, if you have a thought about a GBAS or an innovative concept, and it doesn't fall nicely into one of our workshops or the technical working group, please use the email address specific to this project, which is the sfo.gbas@flysfo.com. We are tracking those questions and trying to funnel them into this as well. So we'll talk about some of these questions and how they look, but I just want to kind of brief folks that this is available. And the other section that I wanted to cover here today in a little bit more detail are the latest on the community flight procedure packages. And as I mentioned, the last time we were here in early June, at that time, we only had 2 community flight procedure packages uploaded to the SFO website or the noise.flysfo website for folks to take a look at. And those were draft versions. Since then, we have updated the first 2 draft CFPPs into formal community flight procedure packages, and then we published an additional 10. And so I want to spend just a little bit of time tonight talking about what those look like and what they mean. I'm going to jump over to another view in a moment, but one thing I wanted to point out is we are planning on 2 additional community flight procedure packages to become available to members of the public for their review somewhere probably in the next 30 days. Those 2 CFPPs are related to the current charted visual flight procedure known as the tiptoe, which is an existing charted visual flight procedure that is used frequently to runways 28 left and 28 right. We heard a lot of feedback both during the Northern California Airspace Workshop, and we've heard feedback from some other meetings that it might be a great idea to take a look at whether we could convert that charted visual flight procedure into a GLS procedure to expand its usability with additional air carriers. There are some air carriers that actually fly into San Francisco that have a little bit of difficulty using the CVFP. They in some cases would prefer it to be a slightly different version of a procedure. And so there's an opportunity here for us to look at this as one of our group 1 innovative concepts. And so we're going to be bringing that additional CFPP, technically 2 of them. And the reason why there's 2 is because it would be 1 GLS procedure to 28 left and 1 GLS procedure to 28 right. So that's where the 2 of them would come from. So that will be coming. But at this time, I was going to just jump over to the website and let folks know how you can get to this. So we have a link right here that would take you generally to the location, but I'm going to go into my browser. And if you were to click on, I'm going to maximize this a little bit and zoom in. So I'm at the noise.flysfo.com webpage. This is the general landing area for a lot of the more kind of exciting, I think, noise-related analysis and information that the airport provides. And this is where we've put a lot of our information specific to the GBAS project. And if you're interested in looking at the community flight procedures, there are 3 tabs. The tab in particular that will take you to the CFPPs is this one right here that says GBAS Innovative Approach Procedures. And if you click on the Learn More button, it will take you to this area here. And I'm going to scroll down and hopefully my refresh rate will keep up. This is where you'll find all 12 of our current community flight procedure packages. And there are 2 different ways to look at the information. So we have a brief kind of textual description here about what the innovative group 1 procedures name is in terms of our kind of internal classification. For instance, some of our approach procedures, they have 2 different starting points. And so we break out one community flight procedure package specific to, for instance, the Archie starting point. And then we have a separate one specific to the Eddy starting point. That's so that we can separate the single event noise into 2 distinct buckets so it doesn't get kind of muddy and folks can evaluate that very specifically. The CFPPs themselves are PDFs, and just to bring one up as an example, they look like this. I will get into this one in just a second, but as a reminder, there is a better mapping version of this. So if I were to click here on this link as an example, this will take me to the PDF that I just downloaded from the website. Or if you click on the actual diagram here on the right-hand side, this little mapping diagram, this will take you to an interactive map that allows members of the public or interested parties essentially to look at each of the now 4 different aircraft types worth of single event noise information, and then zoom into areas of particular interest. So I'm just using my mouse wheel, my mouse. There's also buttons here to zoom in and out. And you'll notice that there's a little bit of a timer going on right here. So what's happening is we've set this up so that the noise analysis kind of moves through one at a time across each of the different aircraft for the particular innovative approach. So right now we're looking at wide body 1. For the GLS Alpha innovative approach concept for the Archie. Starting at Archie, technically the noise analysis, we backed it up to the last common point on the arrival that's likely to be used for the approach. So this is the Archie, starting the approach at Archie, but backing up all the way to Freely as an example. And so it will just automatically kind of roll through between each of the aircraft types. And as a reminder, we are using generic names for the aircraft types, narrow body 1, narrow body 2, etc. The reason why we have to use generic names is because the noise information that's available to us requires us to de-identify the specific aircraft type. In other words, we're not allowed to make comparisons between what one aircraft manufacturer's noise profile might be against another manufacturer with a very similar aircraft. So we're not allowed to say, exactly what aircraft they are, but we did want to give different examples. And so that's what you're seeing here is narrow body 1, narrow body 2, wide body 1, wide body 2. And you can zoom into roughly this far. So again, our concept for presenting what the potential change in noise might be is to show areas of positive change using a green area, potential areas where the noise might slightly be louder in a purple area. And then the intended flight track is the black line in here. So we do encourage folks to kind of look at the information in this level of detail. We also encourage folks to take a look through the packages themselves, which is what's right here. And I just want to take a moment to go through the community flight procedure package because there are some updates and enhancements that we've applied even to our draft version. So the first thing you'll notice is that if you download a community flight procedure package, it used to start on this page where we have a kind of a 3-dimensional overview of the intended flight path with identifiers for the kind of the key waypoints that are being used. The blue section is the initial approach. The white section is the intermediate, and the red section is the final approach. And just as a reminder, that red section is really what the GBAS is augmenting. So in the other sections where it's an RNAV or RNP1 technically, aspect of the approach procedure to come in and then connect to the GBAS augmented segment. If the altitudes that we're evaluating went up, we use a green box to identify that. So for instance, this innovative concept, the GLS alpha to 28 left, we're looking at an innovative altitude increase here at side-by to go from what it currently is at 4,000 feet, a minimum altitude of 4,000 feet, and raising it up to a minimum altitude of 5,100 feet. So that's an 1,100 foot gain there. That's where it used to start. Now, what we've done here is we realized there's a lot of information in each one of these PDFs. So we've done our best to create this kind of summary page to help everyone understand what they're seeing on each of the subsequent pages of any given community flight procedure package, with the goal of maybe helping folks to jump to a specific section of interest. So this is a good one, I think, to review if you're new to the CFPPs. The other information I think hasn't changed significantly, but I'll go through it very quickly. We have on the right-hand side, we have the flight inspection graphic, which is what the procedure would look like if it was carried forward to become an FAA public procedure. This is kind of the way pilots and air navigation specialists and air traffic controllers maybe look at the approach procedure. On the left is the closest matching current procedure, and so the idea here is we're showing the innovative concept on the right and the existing version on the left. In many cases, the waypoints are identical, and really what we're changing are just the altitudes to try to take advantage of the GBAS's ability to give us a slightly precise but steeper glide path angle coming into the runway. And then the next couple of sections are showing the single event noise analysis. Again, using the concept that a positive shift is, as in a potential reduction in noises, would be green, and any potential increases in noise would be shown in a purple area. So we have one here for narrow body 1. We also show for each of the noise sections more information about how that noise was calculated in AEDT. So we show the altitude profile, the flap settings, the net thrust, which is a very important value if you really want to get into the weeds on how noise calculations are occurring, and also the ground speed calculations. And we show that for each of the other aircraft. So here's narrow body 2, wide body 1, and wide body 2. And at the end of each of these single event analysis, we've endeavored to make kind of a summary because obviously there's a lot of information being presented here. And so the project team put together kind of a summary of what we think are some of the critical metrics for residents to consider when they're thinking about giving us feedback about whether this might be a good idea to take this innovative procedure forward, or whether they feel that this needs more refinement, as an example. So there are a lot of, I'll just zoom in here, there are a lot of, I think, useful values in here talking about population within the 60 dB SEL contour, and how that might change. So here's the existing approach on the left, and here's what would happen, with this particular innovative approach. And then looking at kind of other, and this one's also broken out by aircraft. So this is for narrow body 1, narrow body 2, and then there's another summary page after that for wide body 1 and wide body 2. There's also some additional information following that about how to consider the noise information itself, just as a human being kind of experiencing noise in the world. And then we've updated our glossary section as well, based on, again, feedback from the public. You may also notice, I wanted to kind of point out a different example. So in this particular community flight procedure package, which is for the GLS BVE, this is the innovative concept where we would consider converting the FMS bridge visual, which is a very widely used approach procedure today under VFR conditions. So this is a procedure that many of the airlines have and they use successfully. And we've heard in other meetings like this and through the technical working group that residents seem to be maybe a little bit happier with what happens with the aircraft profiles when they fly the bridge visual compared to other kind of existing procedures. The challenge for this one is we were trying to figure out a way to convert this into a GLS approach procedure. As a result of that conversion, we wound up with an identical match. And because our noise analysis is trying to compare the innovative GLS concept against the closest instrument procedure that exists, and in this case, our GLS version would be identical to the FMS bridge visual, you will notice that there is no green or purple areas because the noise that an aircraft would generate flying the FMS bridge visual would be anticipated to be identical if they were flying it under GLS conditions. The reason why we're interested in converting this into a GLS procedure is because it would potentially increase its usability. It would also increase the repeatability of where the aircraft kind of maneuver, because an FMS bridge, the FMS bridge visual is still a visual approach procedure, and there's some variations that a pilot is permitted to utilize when they fly a visual approach procedure. So converting it to a GLS would ensure, for instance, that aircraft don't kind of turn a bit early on this procedure as they're visually cleared towards 28 right in particular. So I just wanted to make sure folks understood there are some procedures where you will not see green or purple, and that's because the innovative approach is identical to the closest existing approach that it was being modeled against. There is one other example that I just wanted to draw people's attention to, which is the down the bay approach. This one is a little bit challenging as well, because the conversion, the nearest instrument approach procedure to this one isn't actually an instrument approach at all. It's a vectors-based procedure that is safely executed by basically through the skill of the Northern California TRACON folks, where they are vectoring aircraft off of the arrival kind of down the bay. And so from a single event noise comparison, there are no approach procedures today that we can compare this to. But what we were able to do is take some of that historical track information for what had been, where aircraft were going from their vectors that they were receiving from NCT, and use that to inform kind of the safest path for aircraft to utilize here. So again, for this particular one, for the down the bay approach, you also will not see green or purple. But we do want folks to be able to see the noise contours that are being calculated. So you can see narrow body 1 here, and on the more extreme end, you can see wide body 2 with kind of wider noise contours from a single event perspective. The last thing I wanted to cover, just going back to the website itself, is where to find the latest information about the questions and answers. I showed that PDF very quickly. So I've gone back to the primary noise.flysfo.com webpage. And I mentioned there are 3 tabs. One is kind of information about the GBAS and the project here at San Francisco. This one that I was just spending a little bit of time in is where to go get those CFPPs and look at the maps about the single event noise analysis. The last one is this tab called GBAS Presentations and Q&A. And if you click on that button, you'll find 2 very important, I think, clusters of information. One of them is all of the past presentations that the airport and the SFO GBAS project team or others supporting the SFO GBAS project team have made, including tonight's presentation. So for folks, as I mentioned at the very beginning, if you're interested in the PowerPoint aspect of what we're reviewing, you can go here and grab a PDF copy of it. This is also where you will find the Q&A section. And we have received, I was just going to download the latest batch. So what I did was I clicked on the download button for the Q&A, and it pulls up this PDF. And I'm just going to quickly scroll to the bottom. You can see the question number. I think at this point we have received 142 questions. Some of these date back as far as 2018 with our first opportunity here at Palo Alto to work with some of the residents. And what we're doing with our Q&A status now, I'm just going to zoom back up to the top, is we're endeavoring to kind of categorize the question based on how we are interpreting it as a project team. We're providing where that question came from and the date. Then we're trying to apply the actual question itself. In some cases, the question that we received was actually multiple questions. And so if that was the case, we broke them out into individual rows that you'll see here. The status here is really to help ourselves and you all to track along with where we might be in answering the question. So if we have provided an answer to the question, we use the green color and like a checkbox, and you can see here in the legend, the estimated time we have remaining until we believe we'll have a good answer to the question. So there are a couple of questions either where we're still working on the best possible answer. Here's one as an example. And in this case, I can tell you from experience, if it's here, that means that the project team has provided answers. We're just waiting to go through our formal process of review here at the airport side. A gray one, as an example, means the question just came in and the project team may not have even had a chance to look at it. So I think, and then the answers are kind of over here on the right-hand side. So I think that's the majority of the information we wanted to cover for tonight's briefing. I did have one more slide. The that I wanted to share with folks, which is about the next steps relative to our public meetings. And I think it kind of summarizes down to 4 things in particular. We're very interested, as we always have been and continue to be, to get feedback from the residents about these innovative procedure concepts by reviewing the community flight procedure packages. We think that's going to be the best way to get a lot of information about what we're looking at and what these future concepts could be with the GBAS. Compare those impacts and benefits. If you see one particular aircraft, let's say, that potentially has an impact, think about it. Think about what that might mean to you. And if you think that that's something that could be modified, we'd love to hear about it. If it's unacceptable, please let us know. If you think there's benefits to, because every aircraft you're seeing looks like it could be potentially beneficial to where you live, we'd like to hear that too. Positive feedback is just as meaningful as concerns. And then our goal is to, again, get as much of that feedback as we can by the end of the 4th quarter, because while we have 12 CFPPs today, and we will have 14 total in 30 days, we fully respect that we may not be asking the FAA in the end to develop, all these instrument procedures. We just want to develop the ones that we get, where we get virtually no negative feedback from the residents on. And then those would be the highest likely candidates to take forward. So with that, I just wanted to pass it back over to open up the questions and answers. But before we do that, Bert, is there anything else that I may have failed to mention before we jump over?
No, Paul, I think you covered everything rather well. And sorry, folks, I was wearing the mask earlier, but was able to get that removed. So hope you can all hear me now. The presentation path, I think, was fairly explanatory. We were able to enhance a little bit from the Roundtable Technical Working Group, and basically we'll be tumbling through both of these meetings as we go forward into the final phases in the 4th quarter, and hopefully we'll be able to come down to some conclusions and make some decisions.
All right, thank you, Paul. A lot of very interesting information, and I'll be looking forward to looking at it on SFO's website. So into our Q&A now. I see some hands raised already, but if you'd like to ask a question, please raise your hand. And again, as I call on you, you'll be promoted to a panelist and have the opportunity, if you wish, to turn your video on, unmute, and ask your question. So let's start with Mark Scholl.
Hi, thank you. Thank you, Paul, for the presentation. As usual, it was excellent. A couple of things, though. The main thing that I remain concerned, I think a lot of us remain concerned about, is in fact, and applies to all of the procedures, would be the transition at EDI from the surface structure to the GBAS segment that you guys are working on. And the fact that, the SFO team is not coordinating closely with the PBN full working group that is responsible for the surfer design. The speed brake problem at EDI was not in the original surfer design. In fact, it wasn't until Surfer 3. And part of the idea there was, if you look at their notes, was to keep the airplanes higher longer. And you're suggesting keeping them a little bit, higher longer past, they kept them high till fully. Then suddenly they had to decelerate. If they stay higher longer, how are they really going to, could that move the speed brake zone from where it is today further into Palo Alto? I mean, in theory, I understand why it may not, but I think that needs more explanation. But the main thing is the question, and this was asked during the FAA meeting that the Western region had, was, why aren't the two teams working together to make a transition at EDI and make whatever adjustments on the surface structure to take advantage of the GBAS technologies? This isn't really totally a Paul question. This is really SFO management. Thank you.
You're on mute, Paul.
I was just saying, sorry, thank you. I was hoping I might have an opportunity to speak to it. I appreciate the feedback, Mark, as always, and these are great questions. I can't answer every aspect of your question, I think, but I can suggest that I know the FAA's goal with the full working group is to try to find solutions as quickly as possible and in the safe environment that they can to the existing challenges that have been presented by the community. And our opportunity for the GBAS project for Group 1 innovative procedures is fairly fixed. It's if we're successful in getting feedback from the community about the best possible innovative GBAS approaches, we're still 2 years away from having those implemented. And even some of the concepts that I think you've asked about, which we would consider to be more like a Group 2 concept, which we do plan to work with the residents to evaluate as well. Those are even a little bit more far out. So I know that at least a small portion, I think, of the difference between the active PBM full working group that's going on looking at the arrival procedures and our project is really just about time and perhaps about the FAA's desire to try to find something that could be done even faster than the timeline of our innovative Group 1 approaches. So that's not that maybe doesn't answer the entire aspect of it, but I can say that any of the innovative Group 1 approaches that we identify now, if there is a possible solution identified by the FAA in the short term that changes SURFR in some way, it will immediately connect back to these innovative concepts. And there will be opportunities, I think I kind of showed it in the presentation, that if those kinds of changes occur, this project team in the airport will come back out and brief the community on how things might change. And we would use the community flight procedure package mechanism to kind of show what that might look like in terms of the single noise event, specific to the GBAS, specific to the GLS procedures. So I just wanted to offer that up. I don't know, Bert or Christian, if you guys had anything else to add. See, shaking heads. So. But Mark, I'll take your question because I know I didn't answer it fully. So I just wanted to offer that small insight for now.
Okay, Darlene Yapley.
Hey there, there's a lot of buttons to push to get on here. Okay, first of all, thank you so much for doing the dashboard. I really want to give kudos to the entire team. San Francisco's airport's #1 goal is noise reduction, which is also what communities want. As stated at the June 9th SFO meeting, that SFO can actually model these new approaches. And I appreciate it's in Group 2, Paul, but it is very significant to us. If the Group 2 modeling shows so much better noise reduction, the community does not need to spend time on these Group 1 innovative approaches that are 3 to 4 dB, which is imperceptible to the human ear. That's why it's relevant to model it. And we need to model it without these SURFR constraints, which is exactly what Mark Schultz said. So why is this important? Truly innovative approaches that reduce noise so that we can hear the difference can show communities and the FAA that substantial noise reduction for multiple communities can be achieved. This is worth modeling today because the FAA said at the July workshops, after dropping the BSR overlay, that they would consider and welcome new SURFR proposals. And the Group 2 is exactly what that is. In addition, the FAA said in 2018 that they would consider these Group 2 type changes. And they said it would be about 5 years. But if you look at the clock, 2018, that puts us to 2023. We waited 55 months to hear that Big Sur overlay was not feasible. So 3 more years for a big change is worth it. So my request is that SFO model. I'm asking for modeling. I'm not asking for you to implement the procedure, and the FAA does not need to approve modeling, and you are not submitting it. We want to know what is possible for substantial noise reductions. The green that you're showing, et cetera, is not perceptible to the human ear. I mean, it looks great on your visuals, but really, if you look under the hood, we're talking about noise reduction. So literally, you're right, there is noise reduction. But in terms of us being able to hear it, it is not. So I have to question the visual itself. So again, I asked for you to model. Let's not reinterpret what I'm asking for. It's modeling. Thank you.
Got it. I appreciate the points, Darlene. I think I've taken the notes here. You are correct. We do have the ability to model, far more innovative, less constrained aspects, I think, at Eddie. You've probably also heard us, I think, talk in the past about how, there's a little bit of learning and experience, I think, that needs to be gained with the GBAS project. Other airports in the NAS, and here at SFO as well, we have to start with the overlays to make sure all the stakeholders, gain the confidence with it. And it's true that, our innovative group 1 procedures, they have constraints, and therefore, there are even more innovative things that we can do. But for us, that is kind of the next step. I do want to say one thing very quickly. If we find group 1 concepts that many or all residents find appealing to go forward with, for instance, over this area of Palo Alto, even though they would have to start at 6,000 feet at Eddie, having the approach established and getting successful flight operations and getting successful air traffic experience with it would enable us more rapidly in the future to make changes to it, to convert it into potentially one of these group 2 examples like what you're describing. So just thinking about the mechanics of building experience with all of our stakeholders, if we started with something, let's say that was like the GLS Alpha for 28 left, where it's just a little higher and shallower, and then we very quickly come up, even in the next couple of months, let's say, with our group 2 innovative analysis that starts even higher, if we're able to publish the first one, that's just a little bit higher but is stuck at Eddie, there would be an opportunity at the next iteration to then rapidly kind of convert it. It would just be a change procedure, wouldn't be a new procedure, to potentially increase it higher. So but we fully understand the question, I think, and it is part of our plan to kind of get there. So I'll take it back, and we'll definitely plan to brief folks on how we're progressing towards that modeling.
Okay, our next question is from Rebecca Ward.
Hi, Paul, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Oh, great. I asked you at the last one about the tiptoe visual and the fact that at side-by it's 5,000 feet versus the RNAV at 4,000 feet. And I don't understand why you're actually doing an overlay for the 4,000 feet at side-by versus just doing it for the tiptoe, which is 5,000 feet. Right, because you've got 1,000 feet there. And by the way, they do typically use the tiptoe. So if you're going to use the RNAV, and that's really the primary, you're really going to be 1,000 feet lower than what we probably experience today. So I wondered if you could comment on that and why you couldn't just do something along those lines, which would actually raise the altitude and hopefully make it quieter, because I assume the noise modeling you're showing is the RNAV approach, right? So you're assuming 4,000 and 4,000 at side-by. Am I correct in that?
Well, so the GLS Alpha concept that we have would be 5,100 at side-by versus the existing, when compared to the existing RNAV, which is down at 4,000. When we're looking at converting the tiptoe kind of as a separate standalone community flight procedure package, in that particular case, it will probably look a lot like the FMS bridge visual conversion that we did today. So for instance, we have an existing CFPP right now called the GLS BVE, like bridge visual. And so in that one, it's identical. Like, so it's the FMS bridge visuals day is 5,000. Our GLS concept is also 5,000. So what we're looking at right now for the tiptoe, it will be the same thing. It will be 5,000 and 5,000. So maybe is your question, why are we not starting kind of December
Well, I mean,
with an over
yes,
with the identical of the CVFP? Sorry, go ahead.
well, what I'm trying to figure out is why you're not trying to go sort of higher than the 5,000, right? Because I think Darlene mentioned this. I mean, 5,100, it's not going to do anything, right? I mean, it's nominal. And so, part of the challenge is we have a large concentration of planes, right? And they're extremely noisy. So what you're proposing just doesn't really have any impact. It really just, it doesn't. I'd love to say it does, but it's very nominal. And so I feel like, as everybody else has said, we really need to think about doing something more than what you're proposing, because it's really not going to do anything for us.
I think I understand your question a little better. And I agree that if we were looking at and you'll see some of our community flight procedure packages, we aren't actually changing the altitudes at side-by at all. So as an example, one of the options that we have is the GLS R, which is basically taking the one of the RMP approaches to runway 28 right and converting it into a GLS. And that one, actually, no, I think that's a bad example because that one does have an altitude change that we're making. My point being, there are some where the altitude at side-by is already 5,000, and it's very close to the altitude where the noise modeling suggests that you're not likely to need to use speed brakes or do flap deployment. And what's been very interesting so far, just from our team's analysis perspective, is that I think it's the FAA does, the FAA has already kind of put procedures out there that have these better altitudes. It's just that they're kind of sitting in different categories of procedures. And our idea of having more of them available as innovative GLS procedures means that aircraft operators that want to utilize the GLS, because they have to request these procedures. If we have more of them kind of attached to the GLS, then it increases the likelihood that those aircraft are going to use that higher path over and over. So in that sense, the noise benefit may come from just getting more and more airplanes onto the better beneficial paths that even exist today, as opposed to the aircraft that use just the standard RNAV GPS or the standard ILS approach that has that 4,000 foot mark at side-by. And then those aircraft, if they just keep using those existing approaches, you may still continue to experience the noise you're experiencing today. Whereas if we can get some of those converted to GLS, then those aircraft are going to have those options, and the crews that are kind of engaged in the airlines who are already indicating they want to really use GLS here at San Francisco, they're just by default going to be using the better noise paths, and that's what we would hope to find. But we do agree, these noise gains are not they're not the highest gains that we would hope to achieve from the GBAS moving forward, and that's what Group 2 I think is for. So I hope that kind of sort of answered your question, but I definitely I think I understand your point.
Okay, I appreciate it. And I know you're going to do noise monitoring, but earlier this year, SFO did do noise monitoring in Palo Alto and Bellhaven. It would be great to get, and I think it's more of a Bert question, it would be great to get, and maybe Palo Alto can follow up, Palo Alto City, to get those noise monitoring reports released, because I haven't seen them, they don't appear to be on the website, just so we can do a compare and contrast, because you're doing this other stuff too, to see, what it actually is versus what you're showing on these modeling things that you're going to be doing with the airlines.
Happy to answer
Thanks,
that
Rebecca.
question real quick, if you don't mind. We are redesigning the portable noise reports, and we'll be churning those out pretty quickly. And the data from those, as you may have noticed, one of the locations on the planned noise monitoring locations is side-by, which is the location where we did the monitoring already.
Are you going to release that monitoring? The noise
Yes,
monitoring
plan.
report?
Yes, definitely.
Okay, thanks, Rebecca. We're going to move on to,
Yep, thank you.
I'm saying this wrong, but Subodh.
I think you got that right, Brad. Yeah, I'd like to request SFO to share the expected changes in CNEL levels over communities such as Los Altos, Palo Alto, and Menlo Park, to allow residents to understand whether or not this new surfer GBAS approaches will truly reduce noise. Communities need to know the overall noise impacts, but I don't think they know it today because I believe SFO is only showing changes in SEL metric, and SEL is only for one plane and won't actually tell you whether surfer noise is really reduced noise over the communities. Additionally, the packages only show about 15 to 50 SFO arrivals potentially using GBAS innovative approaches in late 2023. I think surfer arrivals are about 30% of arrivals. So that means about 5 to 15 planes per day may use surfer GBAS. So that's quite small, given that surfer was close to 200 planes per day before COVID. Additionally, will this small GBAS usage really reduce surfer noise for people on the ground as well? So I'd just like to request these two things from SFO. Thanks.
I appreciate the request. I did want to speak maybe just a bit to the second question you raised about the utilization. The numbers that we're putting in the community flight procedure packages, they're our best estimates, kind of looking in a very short-term future about the aircraft, airlines and flight crews that are going to be equipped and trained to use GBAS flight procedures coming forward. We're very excited that many of the major airlines that fly into San Francisco, they have either committed to going all GBAS, like Southwest Airlines has committed to going all GBAS, or they're making purchases and an installation for many of their future aircraft deliveries to essentially ensure that they have 100% GBAS capabilities. I can't speak to every airline, but I know United is going to have a significant chunk of its fleet, certainly that flies here. Delta Airlines is going to have a significant chunk. There are even international airlines, because GBAS is so prevalent outside of the United States, ironically, that many of the international carriers, the wide body aircraft, are GBAS capable, and we do expect them to utilize some of these GLS procedures as well. So we're trying to base our estimates off of the concept that even with our innovative group 1 group in that time frame, the flight crews will still need to request to use the GLS procedures. They will not likely be assigned by air traffic control. If that were to change, then the utilization numbers could go up. There are other ways, however, which is also something that we've, I think, spoken about in one of our previous technical working groups, that if these innovative concepts that we believe from noise modeling look very promising, and if the community feedback is very positive, we have the FAA develop them, they go into use, and in real world experience, that people actually experience like a noise benefit. We collectively believe that it is making the situation better. It is relatively straightforward to make a decision to convert those GLS procedures into other navigation modes beyond just the GBAS. But that is a decision in the future. And it's one that we want to start with the GLS, with those aircraft that have the highest navigation capabilities, and really make sure that they're doing the right thing and achieving our goal before we look at potentially enabling them for other aircraft to use that maybe aren't GBAS capable. A good example of that is the down the bay procedure. We would hope that that starting with just the GLS capable aircraft and proving that it is safe and reliable and does maybe give us more of this dispersion opportunity leads us to a future option where it becomes an ARNP approach with a GLS line of minimum. So the GLS would mean that you could use it in all the way down to kind of the moderate IFR conditions. But then there would be other opportunities for just RNAV capable aircraft and RNP capable aircraft. That would mean that every airplane coming into San Francisco at that point could take advantage of the approach. But we want to start with it on the GLS, gain our experience, and then move forward from there. And I did note your CNEL, so thank you for the comment on that.
Okay, our next question is from Jennifer.
Thank you. So I'm interested in how any changes are going to help nighttime noise. And I believe this is where we should have started if GBAS is to decrease noise, is to start with all of the mitigation procedures. And I think it'll be highly controversial for a publication of GLS overlays, which is pouring concrete on what's bad in December. And so is it possible for delaying the publication of the overlays until there is, for example, a test of how all of this work that encompasses so many different things can help eliminate noise at night? Because if you think about it, there shouldn't be any noise at night, given all of the possibilities to allow planes to fly in very precise ways. And the other question I have is, for example, recently in Los Angeles, they talked about RNP. Hey, good news, we have all of this. It's very quiet, but they can only use it with 15 planes. And so there's a whole other story to why something that, you know, so much work goes into something that can't be used. And I want to know about the freighters at night, and specifically about Korean Airlines 214, which literally is one of the reasons I would move, because it comes every night at 1:30 in the morning and it's very loud. How would any and all of these efforts address KE214 and also the flights on Pirate, which should be using something like the Quiet Bridge and all of that, but we still get a lot of noise at night? And so when there's no congestion, what can you do from a process point of view to mitigate GBAS upfront, and to do so with a priority of eliminating noise at night? Thank you.
So that's a really good question, and one that I might need to take away, because I feel like if I try to answer, there's actually quite a few avenues to that. So we might take that one to our Q&A section to answer it in more detail. In particular, the Korean Airlines one is a very interesting question, because we can, I don't know offhand if Korean Airlines, what their equipage rate on GLS is, but we can get an answer to that one, because if they are GLS capable, then that might answer part of your question. But the very first question I think you answered about delaying the publication of the overlay procedures, we do have one small challenge, which is that we cannot commission the GBAS itself here at San Francisco without some instrument procedures to go into the commissioning activities. So the plan at this time is to at least have those overlay approaches available, so that the system can be commissioned and turned on, because again, we have to gain the experience with the system before all of the stakeholders, some on the FAA side, some on the airline side, residents in the Bay Area, obviously, gain confidence that that these other more innovative procedures can be used. So at this point, it would be very difficult, if not impossible, to stop the overlay procedures from being published. But my side comment to that would be that those overlay approaches, they are not going to be automatically assigned by ATC. So the only airlines and opportunity to use them is by a flight crew that requests them and uses them kind of start to finish. So
May I make a comment?
oh, please go ahead.
Why do all the three major highways that go over Palo Alto at once? There's Pirate, there's Surfer, there's Bodega. Why would you have to use all three of these? Why pour concrete on three bad procedures that the public actually has no information on? And why, in order to test or commission GBAS, why not try it with something small and try it for something at night? Because if what you're really trying to get is community acceptance, then you start small with that. Because, you know, saying that the innovatives could happen in 2 years or more, you know, we've been at this already for 3 years. And you know what just happened, as someone already mentioned, what happened with Surfer. So I don't think anybody understands how one buys that kind of future promise. And for anyone today to make that commitment on behalf of future residents or future generations, you know, it's like, you really did that deal. So I think that you need to focus on nighttime. You need to show us how you're going to eliminate the noise of the noisiest flights that are coming in at night. and to have mitigation ahead of publication. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Karen Porter, please.
Yes, hi. Thank you for taking my question. I actually have two. The first is I'm looking at slide 11 of the deck that I think you're presenting, and it shows a purple line between Eddy, actually going all the way to CPIN, but Eddy and side by, which goes directly over Palo Alto. Do I understand correctly that the purple indicates that noise will be increased with GBAS, or did I misunderstand?
So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen really quickly, just to, maybe this will help clarify with the question. So bear with me. So I'm sharing my screen again. So the presentation we're sharing tonight is this one here, and this is the slide 11. Is your question here about this blue area?
Well, the purple that goes from Eddy to side by, which
This one here.
over
Yes.
Palo Alto.
Got it. Sorry. So what we're showing here, and if you'll allow me, this is just a screen capture of one of the pages of the community flight procedure package. So I'm just going to open the community flight procedure package, if that's just maybe to help with your question. I believe it's this one that we took the screen capture of. So this graphic right here, we're just using the color coding to try to help some of the stakeholders that are reviewing these package. And I'll just say this, it is so wonderful to work with all the people in the Bay Area, because there are so many different levels of knowledge and experience. And so some of the folks that we know that want to pick up this community flight procedure package, they're active pilots, they're air traffic controllers. So we wanted to kind of break things out for their ability to digest the information. So blue for us is the initial approach segment. That's what we're trying to show here on this screen. The actual noise, the possible changes in noise that we're modeling, they start here on these pages. So just to walk through it very quickly, for this narrow body 1 aircraft, we're not showing, I'm zooming in. There's a much better way to do this using the GIS aspect that's on the noise.flysfo.com website. So in this area here, narrow body 1 is modeling kind of green, which means we would expect the noise footprint to decrease. For narrow body 2, between side by and Eddy, there's only a very small possible increase. Again, no two aircraft are made the same way, and no two aircraft are flown exactly the same way. So in this case, the one narrow body aircraft we were looking at, it just has more of a possibility to potentially reduce noise than this other narrow body aircraft. And then when we look at wide body 1, which is this one, there's a possible kind of decrease in the noise footprint here in this area. This is the green. And then in this last one here, which is wide body 2, we do see a fairly potentially good reduction in the noise footprint here between kind of Eddy and side by, but you do start to see these kind of purple areas further away from, certainly of interest to South Bay cities, but further away from the Eddy side by section. Those purple areas are kind of below the 60 SEL DBA vicinity. But we're trying to be transparent with what our modeling results are. So they're here for folks. Does that help a little bit with maybe your first question?
Well, yes and no. So it sounds like it's maybe some improvement and some worsening of the noise level, depending on the type of aircraft.
Some of the innovative procedures, it would appear from the noise modeling that all 4 aircraft types only have potential to gain or be the same, either be the same or have an improvement. There are some procedures that we found where you will find these little kind of purple bands. And we want feedback about that. But Christian, I wanted to potentially pass this to you to maybe speak about how the residents could interpret, those small purple areas. Do you have any thoughts, Christian?
Sure. So the 60, 55, and 50 noise level contours, they represent the SEL metric. And more familiar, people are more familiar with the peak noise, the LMAX noise. And in relationship to SEL, LMAX is usually about 10 dB lower than SEL. And in that area, the ambient noise level of the area around is maybe between 40s and 50s. So that area of 60, that contour of 60 represents about 50 LMAX. The 55 SEL represents 45, and so on. This 50 represents a 40 of LMAX. So that's about the area of ambient noise. So these changes will be even more washed out or less noticeable by the residents on the ground.
Okay, I guess I don't fully understand that, but I will study the slides more. If I could pivot to my second question, which is, the main problem that I have with the NetGen implementation in the NorCal Metroplex was the concentration of flight paths. I mean, that's the original sin. Let's just, we can talk about noise levels for different flight paths, but it was the concentration of flights. Is there anything about GBAS that would facilitate more dispersion of aircraft, even back to what it was pre-next gen? So there's a more, fair dispersal of flights, or are we just pretty much, left to live with the concentration of flight paths?
So an excellent question, and definitely deserves the most accurate answer I think our project team can offer. So I might need to take that one back, because I know we've gotten some versions of this question before, and I want to make sure that we give it the best possible answer. I do want to suggest there, in terms of the opportunities for dispersion. One of the examples that we think might start to introduce more kind of dispersed paths or more opportunities for the airlines and air traffic to disperse traffic is like the GLS down the bay approach as an example, GLS DB, and that's the one where it's a vectors implementation today. But vectors are not the easiest thing for everybody to do, because vectors require an air traffic controller to really, pay extremely close attention to everything that aircraft is doing, because the aircraft doesn't necessarily know the next point it's going to go to, right? So the workload for an air traffic controller to issue vectors to an aircraft is higher than an aircraft that has just been cleared to an approach. And obviously, air traffic control is still going to watch the aircraft on approach, but there's some understanding that the controller believes the aircraft is going to navigate between the points and make its way to the runway. So by introducing an instrument approach that emulates the vectors for the down the bay, it may have the effect of increasing the number of aircraft that can use that down the bay procedure. And so that I think is maybe one of the earliest examples with our Group 1 innovative set where there's an opportunity for dispersion. There are some Group 2 things that the GBAS is capable of doing, some of which are maybe achievable in the 5-year timeframe, some of which could take longer than 5 years to implement, that are quite specific to GBAS actually, that might create more creative opportunities for the FAA and airlines and the residents to work together to look for kind of automated path dispersion. That is a very new concept in the FAA. So the good part is the GBAS is very capable of supporting these things. The bad news is the FAA has no criteria yet on how to implement such things. So that's our goal, is put the system in, get the experience on it, prove to all of ourselves that it does achieve our noise benefit. And then when we've got great confidence in the operation of it, then we can come to the table with this emerging criteria with the FAA and say, let's try it here. We've got the GBAS, we can try these other dispersion related concepts when you're ready. And maybe SFO is first, which would be really cool. So, but I know that's the very short answer, and there's more, I think, Karen, to your question. So we'll take it back and make sure that we answer it thoroughly.
Thank you very much. I'm encouraged to hear that.
Okay, Robert is next.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing this information with us today. I'm particularly looking forward to the thrust, speed, and flap information in the CFPPs, though I do think it will be important to verify those predictions. I'd like to follow up your answer to question 107 in the Q&A packet. The question is, what guarantee will residents have that GBAS will not increase the number of airplanes and thus increase noise? And your answer is, GBAS doesn't determine the number of aircraft that utilize SFO, the number of runways do. While I recognize that GBAS isn't going to build any more runways for us, SFO does have some closely spaced runways And I'm wondering, doesn't GLS enable the utilization of those runways to go up, thereby enabling more flights?
Help if I turn the mute button off. I'm so sorry. I endeavored to screen share the latest Q&A PDF, and it's this question right here you're referring to. Is that right?
That's right. Yep.
Yes. So I heard your question for this evening to be one about does the GBAS enable the utilization numbers to go up?
For the closely spaced runways in particular.
I do understand. I think so. In terms of the overlay procedure, so I have so many technical thoughts. I'm just trying to distill them down a little bit. Because there's a lot that is happening and we're really excited about it. But I think maybe the short answer to your question is not in the near term. And by near term, I mean not even in the Group 1 horizon. So here's the maybe more direct answer to it. The air traffic order that surrounds the closely spaced parallel runway operation, which is the 7110.308, it is being updated right now to include the identical overlay procedures for the GLS, again, to help us all build experience with operating the GBAS, even under closely spaced parallel runway operations. So today, the closely spaced parallel runway operations, for the 28s, it's ILS, and for the 19s, it's ILS RNAV. And then when that order is updated and with the GBAS in operation, it will give air traffic and the air carriers an opportunity to use different pairings like ILS-GLS or GLS-GLS or kind of pick your combos. We don't know all of the combinations that will be approved. That's an FAA process. We're still waiting to get more feedback. So our understanding of what the GBAS can enable is that those pairings, the Casper pairings, in terms of what's going to go into the next update, they have to be identical to the existing approaches that are already used in Casper. So the ILS to 28 left is a 2.85 degree glide slope, and the ILS to runway 28 right is a 3 degree glide slope. When we start looking at our Group 1 innovative procedures, where we're really trying to find in some cases modest, in other cases potentially more than modest potential noise benefits, those steeper angles are just enough to make it so that it will be very unlikely, if not impossible, for those innovative Group 1 procedures to be considered as part of the 7110.308 closely spaced parallel runway operation. I'm sorry, it's kind of a mouthful, but the concept is the only opportunity that we see to increase the number of aircraft potentially under Casper would actually come in Group 2, where we start to explore things like the virtually displaced threshold, which could have an interesting noise benefit. And maybe it could start to introduce new opportunities for different aiming points on the runways as a part of the closely spaced parallel runway operation. So I think the direct answer to your question is, we don't see anything in the short-term future that's going to change the number of aircraft that can come in, even under Casper. But maybe under Group 2, there are some opportunities to explore it. And we will do our best to inform the community if that is going to be the case, because clearly you'd want to know if there's more aircraft coming in, even under a very specific set of operating time periods. Does that help to answer your question?
It does, thank you. Of course, the interest in this is not when we have 15 airplanes, it's when all of the airplanes are enabled for GBAS or GLS in the future. So the longer term is important. Will we have an opportunity as a community to, and is SFO willing to consider community input if it turns out that the number of operations will be increased? Is that something that we'll have any say over, or once we go down this approach that's going to be coming, if it's going to be coming?
So if you're referring to maybe some of the Group 2 concepts, yeah, okay, thank you. Yeah, just to maybe focus on the Group 2. It is, our intention right now as a project team is that when we get past Group 1, when we get the feedback about what the best possible concepts are and could be, and then take those forward to production. We started in a group 2 analysis. We intend to keep using the format that you see today with the anticipated number of operations and when they can be used. So some of the feedback you're sharing with us right now, we had the other suggestion, which I think was great, about maybe making more of an emphasis about what the nighttime specific benefits could be. So that's something we could do to the CFPP to make it better, to make it more functional for residents to interpret. We can also potentially look at adding in more information relative to Casper, specifically relative to how it might change traffic numbers. We haven't gotten into group 2 yet, so I'm not really sure how even we would get the estimated increases, but I respect that what you're saying and what I'm hearing is that you like that information if the project team becomes aware of that possible increase, and then we should share it through our CFPPs.
Right, and I think what's behind this is we're seeing on a number of these innovative innovative approaches, not very much change in the number of decibels, SEL. But if that were to increase the number of flights, the number of noise events, that would be probably more consequential than the 2 or 3 decibel change in the loudness of the airplanes. So it is of interest to the community, certainly.
Great.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Robert. I think we're on to round 2 for questions for some folks. So we've got Darlene back. And Darlene, you're still on mute if you're trying to speak.
Just got it. Thank you. Thank you for listening and really trying to understand our request, Paul. It's great. I want to say that an easy request is, instead of saying 5 years out for group 2, if we can say 2023, because every time we ask, it's 5 years out. And we all know this happened over 2 years ago. So I think that's one thing. But my question is, your value proposition, which I heard new tonight, is that you're going to implement group 1 so that you can learn. And I think that, is there a way to come up with kind of a win-win, which is, we want you to learn, but we need to have hope that group 2 is going to do something, because if we stop at group 1, we are not positive towards what you're doing. I mean, let's just be clear. You said you're not going to implement it if you get negative feedback. And right now my feedback is negative. And the only way we're going to have hope is if you model and show us what might be possible. And that's why we're pushing this, because otherwise, why do it? And everyone's going to claim you reduce noise, and the FAA is going to claim they reduce noise. So we don't want that. And also everyone's going to say, well, we've already done a procedure. So, we know you can't commit. We know the FAA has to evaluate and, everything else. But I think instead of claiming that you're going to reduce noise, because truly it's not discernible by the human ear at 3 dB, if you say you are going to learn with the potential for a significant impact reduction, meaning over 3 dB or 4 dB and above, then I think there could be a very positive community response. So I think I'm happy that you gave us that perspective, and I'm kind of giving you how we could make this really, I think what Ivar's vision is how we can collaborate, and absolutely knowing the constraints that you said, group 2 and the FAA. I mean, we've been doing this for years, right? We have that horizon, but we want a significant change. We don't want these little bitty things that we can't really tell the difference of. So I would encourage you to not claim noise reduction if in fact it's not perceptible to the human ear, and push for the learning and give us the modeling so that we all have hope of what's possible. What do you think, Paul?
I think it's very well put. As always, Darlene, you raise extremely well articulated insights and raise great questions that challenge us to make this whole process better. So I really appreciate your feedback. I need to discuss it with the project team about how we would best go about coming up with some of the what I would call group 2 procedures sooner rather than later, because our original timeline, I think, for group 2 analysis was to begin that after we finished out the group 1. Certainly, and the reason why we had been thinking about that way is we don't want to inundate members of the public who maybe haven't had a chance to participate in things like this this workshop or in the other technical working group with so many things that they don't know what's what. They're seeing the same procedures over and over. So I respect that maybe there's a different mechanism that the team could consider to present those modeling results like you're asking. I just need to take that back and discuss it with the project team and figure out what the best way for us might be to do that.
Yeah, I do not think that, I mean, all the questions being asked are trying to understand really if there's going to be a benefit. And the net is, it's not. I mean, regardless of what all the visuals you're showing, it's not perceptible. I mean, you know, if I had to net it out for everybody. So don't spend time with all the minutia, come up with something that is very clear that we're going to benefit from. And then you won't get all these detailed questions. I mean, seriously, the only reason why you're being asked all this is people are trying to avoid worse noise. I mean, the net is we want less noise. And are you going to do something that's going to give us more noise? The second question is, how much less noise are we going to get? If you could explain that simply, all these questions are trying to understand the true impact of these changes. But the goal of everybody on the call is less noise, a lot less noise, not a little noise. So if you're going to achieve that in group 2, everybody would like to know that. And we could get a lot more behind what we're seeing if there was that potential. But we don't see it now, right? I mean, sorry, but we don't see it now.
No, I didn't want to interrupt if you had more
Okay.
to say. I really appreciate the feedback. We'll take it back with the project team to talk about how we can potentially look at some of those model results. I think I'll just this is not a bad news precursor or anything like that, but you know, we've talked about, and you've seen, I think there were questions about our FAA stakeholders. You know, we have a flight procedures subcommittee that works diligently to come up with procedures that have the highest chance of actually being developed by the FAA in the future and turned into flight procedures. So that would be the same mechanism that we would use to look at even some of these group 2. So you know, it's a multi-layered thing we have to figure out kind of behind the scenes about how we would work with our existing stakeholders to think about some of those concepts and bring them forward, because we'd be working right on the edge of criteria that is starting to emerge internationally, but does not have that hasn't come into concrete terms yet here in the United States. So we just need to think about that on our side. I will take that action, and I would say some of the innovative procedures, I think we from the modeling perspective, they do look quite promising.
Not over Palo Alto, Paul. Sorry.
I understand. I think,
And also other cities. I think if we had more granularity of the different cities, I think they would see that it's not going to, I mean, I'd like to see which cities are going to get more than 4 dB benefit. And the other thing I would say is just that the FAA at that public workshop really put out the welcome mat. Show us what you would propose. So what you're messaging is different than that messaging that we heard at the July workshop, which is come with your proposals of how we could reduce noise. That's why we're trying to come with the proposals.
Thank you, Darlene. I want to break in for a second just to say it's 6:32, which is 2 minutes past the time we were supposed to close. I think, again, like last time, we can go till 6:45, but that's more or less a hard stop. We still have a couple people who haven't asked a question yet, so I'm going to move on to them. Let's try to limit it to 1 question so that they can both get a chance. And then if we have any more time, we'll take any others as well. So Tom Shannon, please.
Yeah, Paul, can you hear me? Okay, Paul, this is just a basic observation. So I live very close to Side-by, and over the course of this meeting, there's been 17 to 18 airplanes go over our house. And this is the dinner hour, and oftentimes we try to eat out on our deck. And so every 4 to 5 minutes, we get interrupted by an airplane. And I know that's what you're working on, but I just think this kind of hard data is important. Then also talking about the number of planes at night. There is the 130 cargo plane that can be very low. And then there's another set at 430. And if, again, I live in a 100-year-old house, It has windows open, and these airplanes will wake you up. So, as many people have spoken, not only do we need relief in sound, but I think it's rather unfair that 17 airplanes can go over one house in 1 hour. So, and then my last thing is, I don't understand why the air traffic controllers can't take these late 1:30 a.m. and 4:30 a.m. flights out over the bay.
I'm taking notes. Some of those questions are a little beyond my current
Sure,
knowledge.
I realize that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so we'll take those back and see what we can do to get an answer to them.
Thanks a lot. Much appreciated.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you, Tom. Tammy is up.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, hi. Well, I'm excited about what I'm hearing about Bodega because Bodega is a huge impact over the peninsula. If we could get them back over the bay, that would be great. You know, the select committee was called the Select Committee on Southern Arrivals to the peninsula, but we have been hugely impacted by the addition of Southeastern arrivals. I mean, we're getting Fort Lauderdale and Austin and Houston, Dallas they're flying out to the ocean and then turning around and joining Surfer to fly to San Francisco. So the fear is that Surfer is just going to be further congested, further compounded into one continual thoroughfare. And I feel like these flights, I think there was data early on that showed that these flights came up from a south of the bay approach. And I think that something's critical that I'm missing here in the conversation is that we have to talk about, while we're talking about small, unperceptible changes, we have to address frequency. And as the person spoke just a moment ago, it's like sometimes it's just nonstop flights and we're not even back to full board yet with COVID. So in all this, is anyone considering the frequency? Can we put these flights back where they came from so that we can decongest Surfer?
I think I've got your question, and that is going to be a more complicated one to answer. So I might need to take it back if that's okay. And we'll do our best to either find answers ourselves or maybe pass this question on to some of our FA stakeholders for them to maybe address in a future meeting.
I mean, that would be great because the reality is this isn't going to be a black and white fix. We're going to need Bodega to go back, huge impact. We need some of these flights from the southeastern United States to go back where they came from. We need pirate flights to not be sent south to Los Altos and then to fly back to San Francisco. It's just all these little things. And now it's just like, this is crazy. So we need to chip away at multiple factors. Thank you.
Got it. Thanks.
Thanks, Tammy. Next up is Jen. Jen, I think you should be able to speak. But you just went on mute. There you go.
Okay, there. Okay, sorry about that. I wanted to just reiterate what Robert Holbrook had kind of said. One of the advantages that the FAA cites for GBAS is it gives airports the ability to increase capacity. And so I do think that is a valid concern here for residents. And we kind of want assurances that in the long term, GBAS won't ultimately translate to simply more planes in the air. So that was one of the concerns. The other question that I did have is having to do with there was a map that Karen Porter had pointed out with the green and the purple. I just wanted to find out on the green and the purple areas, those are the areas where it will be either louder or less loud. On the white areas, I'm assuming there's zero noise change. And on those very narrow purple areas, is that equivalent to maybe 1 or 2 houses wide? That's what I'm a little bit, I'm just not clear on how many people are impacted on some of those purple areas.
It's a good question. I'll try to answer it very quickly. So the width of the purple areas, it varies by, when those purple areas show up on some of the CFPPs, it's not a consistent width or anything like that. It's really just whatever the model thought the difference might be. In some cases, you're absolutely right. It could be as narrow as a house or a street width. In other areas, it might be just a little bit bigger. In some, on the flip side, in some of the potentially positive gains, some of the possible reductions in the noise contours are so large because they're measured. We're looking at them in 5 SEL dBA increments. Some of them are so big they start to overlap on one another. So in that case, it's possible that for those specific procedures, when compared to their closest equivalent, that there could be a noticeable difference for that aircraft type. But you're right, for the ones where there is no green or purple, it's probably more important to take a look at, there's a page in the CFPP that shows kind of, noises humans would experience through their daily lives to kind of think about, what those contours actually mean. So in that case, if you don't see any green or purple, it's because the procedures we're proposing is identical to one that already exists. And in that case, we wouldn't, there isn't any difference to kind of measure, but we would encourage you to kind of think about the scale that's presented in the tail section. Sorry, Christian, did I maybe you wanted to jump in?
Yeah, and that depends. That white area with no purple or no green depends on what the contour at those intervals are saying. For example, the 50 and the 55. If you're between those two contours and you see a little purple on both contours, then the area in the white in between them will also get a little bit of increase. That's because we're just showing 5 dB intervals. But if we showed 1 dB intervals, you'd see a little bit of purple on all those little intervals. We're just not showing that because it would just cover up the whole map. That's why they're colored. They're non-colored.
I see. So let me just clarify. So where we see the purple, there's a 5 dB incrementation. Where we see the white, there could be increases as well. It's just less than 5 dB. Is that correct?
No.
Oh.
If you could show a quick contour there. So between the 60 and the 55, you see that there is a little bit of purple.
Right.
That just happens at this. We just wanted to show just at the 60 and 55 level. But for example, if we go right down the middle to the 58, there would also be a small purple area. So the area between the 60 and the 55, it's all increasing just by a tiny bit. The noise model can draw noise contours and also calculate very, very small differences. For example, on the 60 level, that increase it looks like by looking at the map, less than 1/2 of dB. That means that whole area around there will get an increase of less than 1/2 a decibel.
Okay. Okay.
Thanks, Christian.
I think we hopefully have time for one more quick question from Jennifer.
Thank you, Brad. I think documentation is going to be a really big issue. As you know, unfortunately, despite our best efforts to try to get involved in the publications you're doing in December, none of our questions were answered as far as process. And so now you're about to print a publication that essentially is concrete for if capacity increases, anything goes, and the public is not aware. So my suggestion is that if there is no mitigation before publication, which there won't be because you're not even thinking about it, then that there should be an environmental assessment that also considers the impacts of other airports and more airplanes, and for the actual noise studies to be done the way the public really wants to see them. And I know that often it's said, oh, that would take too long and cost too much money. No, the FAA is evaluated and a full environmental assessment can be done in a period between 2 and 18 months. That's certainly a sufficient amount of time for you guys to learn and do all these different things and to do it within an accommodating process that really takes in community concerns. So I just want to, I think you should explore many process options because things have not worked out in the last 3 years that we've tried to engage SFO on data analysis and all the issues that we've tried. And now we're up against this thing. And then the only other thing would be if the FA is not here and it's like a bunch of kids talking without the parents home. So we could talk about everything, but nothing is going to work out unless the FA is in the room. So I just want to point that out, and it's very scary. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. So we're about at time. I did want to mention 2 members of our Palo Alto City Council were at the meeting. Councilmember Greer Stone was here but had to leave a while ago. Councilmember Lydia Koo is still here, and I'd like to invite her if she'd like to make any closing comments for us.
Thank you so much to the San Francisco team for being here on GBAS. This is our second meeting. I wanted to ask if it would be possible for you to let everybody that is attending here today, what is the next steps that we can expect?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think I'm going to pull my presentation back up here very briefly. Let me start the screen share if I can. So the next steps are we do plan, I believe, Bert, if I'm not mistaken, we do plan to come back at least one more time here to Palo Alto specifically in the month of, I think it's October, is that correct?
Late September, early October, right?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for clarifying. So we will come back one more time. As I mentioned a little bit towards the beginning of our kind of prepared presentation, we do have 2 more community flight procedure packages that we want to make available in the next 30 days. And so at this phase of where we are with looking at these group 1 innovative procedures, we're very interested in feedback from the residents, from any of the other, from cities, from council people, from representatives, about what they think about the innovative procedures, whether it's positive feedback, whether it's negative feedback, whether it's questions that you see in the materials themselves. Our goal in particular, we are going to be looking and keeping our ears attuned for any negative feedback because we want to find those procedures where we either have no negative feedback or we have a little bit of negative feedback, and then maybe we come back and share that and discuss it in a forum like this. But I think that is our goal, is we want to get that feedback if we can, try to gather as much of it by the end of the 4th quarter of this year, and then take only those innovative procedures that look like they're going to have the highest chance of making things better in the short term, and then being a launching platform in the long term, and requesting the FAA to start development of those. So reviewing the CFPPs, providing feedback, especially through the email. That's probably the easiest way here, which is the sfo.gbas@flysfo.com. That's a email account specifically for us, providing that feedback and letting us know. That's what we'd like to get, is that kind of feedback.
Thank you, Paul. So for everybody who is on this meeting, to make sure that you monitor our website for the announcement of the next meeting, and to please send in your comments. As you know, being here in Santa Clara County, we're just right outside of the SFO roundtable. So, but the flight paths out of San Francisco Airport and into San Francisco Airport does impact a lot of us here in Santa Clara County. So we do appreciate very much that you are doing this presentation to include us. And I do want to thank Brad Eggleston for hosting us. And so with great gratitude, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Koo. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Joanna Tran, who's helping me keep this running smoothly. Thanks, Joanna. Thank you to SFO staff and to the community for all the very insightful questions. As Paul and Bert mentioned, we're already talking about dates for a 3rd meeting. So we should have that set up soon. We'll announce that pretty widely. And in fact, with an email to everyone who attended this meeting. So you should definitely hear about that. So thanks again. And with that, I think we'll close out the meeting for today. Good night.